Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the General Microsoft 365 Development Recording Call. This is the bi-weekly sync, and today we are going to talk about the updates about the PnP core library and the PnP framework, the PnP PowerShell, as well as your teams and the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. We will also take a couple of minutes to take the well-known together mode picture, and then we will have some great demos. We will have a demo by David Warner and Hugo Bernier about the content query web part and Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And then we will end up with a demo by Matt Wolodarsky from Microsoft, introducing the new SharePoint Success Site template that we released in the Lookbook site just a few weeks ago. So let's start. And first of all, let me remind you that you can contribute to the PnP Microsoft 365 PnP community in multiple ways. Of course, you can benefit of the demos, and you can provide your own demos and solutions to share with the community good patterns and good examples about how to use and how to extend Microsoft 365. You can contribute on GitHub, and you can provide feedback through all of the GitHub repository that we have on the PnP organization and under the SharePoint organization as well. There are plenty of content that we provide as PnP, like, for example, the whole set of videos that we have about extending Microsoft 365 under the AKMS M365 Dev YouTube channel, as well as the community videos. And the recording of this meeting will go into that category as well. We have a bunch of open source organizations, mainly the github.com/SharePoint one, the PnP one, as well as the Office Dev and the Microsoft Graph one, where you can find samples and open source ready to go libraries and solutions. We have a samples gallery where you can find a bunch of examples categorized by topic, target platform, and technology, as well as if you go to akm.ms/m365pnp, you can find all of the detailed information about the Microsoft 365 project, and you can also see how you can contribute and become part of the Microsoft 365 project. So keep an eye on that one as well. We have tons of samples available specifically in the area of Microsoft Teams, and we are also working on making it possible to have even a better organized way of searching and finding all of the samples and all of the extensibility points for Microsoft 365. So stay tuned, and you will be able to, and you already are able to get access to a lot of useful content in order to start learning how to develop in the fields of Microsoft 365 and specifically Microsoft Teams. And then we have the great initiative called Sharing is Caring. I think David can share with us a few ideas about how the Sharing is Caring initiative works.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Paolo. So for all those that are new, it's important to know that the Patterns and Practices community is an open source and inclusive community, which means that we welcome all sorts of contributions and usage patterns of our resources and tools. But we also understand that using some of these resources, as well as and especially contributing back to these resources and tools, can be a little intimidating and have a lot of moving pieces that you may not be familiar with. For example, things like GitHub pull requests and forks and how to work within that ecosystem. The Sharing is Caring sessions provide live, hands-on guidance for you in small settings with other community members that we learn and go through the process of using these tools together. It ranges from first-time contributor to contributing to community docs, so you do not absolutely have to be a developer. If you are a developer, though, there are other sessions like using the PnP SPFX samples with Node Version Manager, setting up your workstation, and more sessions are coming soon. After the monthly call next Tuesday, we're having our first Ask Me Anything session. Now, these are going to be initiative-themed sessions, which means that each AMA is going to be on a specific initiative from PnP. We're going to start with community docs. We're going to have the subject matter experts. Mark Anderson and Emily Mancini are going to be joining us, and they're going to be there to answer any questions you might have about community docs. And then at the end of that session, There's going to be an opportunity to ask questions about anything PnP related, but the beginning of it will cover and focus on Community Docs. So it's a great way to interact and get collaborative with the PnP team. As you can see, there's a new design coming soon to the PnP Sharing is Caring site. It's going to match more of the primary PnP landing page. So we're excited to debut that in the next week or two. And we're going to be testing out a new initiative called Sharing is Caring Office Hours. Now, this is fantastic because like the Sharing is Caring sessions, you'll be able to join and collaborate with members of the PnP team. But if you're just looking for a little one-on-one guidance around maybe a second set of eyes to something like a contribution you're getting ready to make, or some specific question that doesn't fall under one of the Sharing is Caring session umbrellas, you'll be able to request time in a one-on-one session. So we'll share more about that, but it's going to be a really exciting opportunity if you're looking for a little bit of that one-on-one guidance to ensure that you're confident and comfortable with contributing to the community and using those tools. So please join some of these sessions. Hugo and I administer them. We've got April Dunham now joining the team, for those that didn't see that announcement. So welcome, April. We're super, super excited to work together with April, one of our good friends. A lot of exciting things for 2021 in play. Join one of those sessions, aka.ms Sharing is Caring, and we hope to see you soon. Paolo, back to you.
Thank you, David. And yes, Sharing is Caring is really a great and amazing initiative. So don't be shy if you haven't yet started contributing to the PnP project and community project. Please attend to any of the Sharing is Caring events and start contributing, because we really like to see you contributing back, because that's the overall idea of having a real and active community. So thank you again, David, for managing this great initiative. So what else? In next week, we will have the SharePoint monthly community call. It's a recurring meeting that we have on a monthly basis, and there we will see what are the latest and greatest news in the fields of the PnP and the SharePoint community. There will be demos, one from Julie Turner and one from Erwin van Unen. So definitely you should attend, you should be there and attend this meeting actually next week. So now let's move to the news about the libraries and the projects and content that we are making available to the community. And first of all, let's talk about the PnP.NET libraries news. I think that Bert is online. Yes, he is. So please, Bert, take the stage.
Yep, thank you, Paolo. First of all, let's kind of quickly recap on what are we building, what are we doing with PnP.NET. So we have today two libraries, PnP Framework and PnP Core SDK. PnP Framework actually is the older PnP Core SDK, but then renewed, cleaned, focused for SharePoint Online. Whereas PnP Core SDK is the brand new, newly written, newly coded library that is our main focus going forward. Now both are there, both will be there for a long time. And we are actually on track to achieve our planning of going GA with the PnP Framework next week. So still in January. So next week we'll go GA. And PnP Core SDK will go GA normally in February timeframe. So we're kind of on track on that one. So what happened in those two libraries? For PnP Framework, the main thing, one of the main things actually, is that we actually removed the Pages API code, so that, you know, for the folks that use the library or that use the PnP templates, there is an API that you can use to create modern pages and read pages, etc. And that has been there for like a long time, but now we actually deleted all that code and replaced it with the same implementation coming from PnP Core SDK. So there's a pattern that you'll see us doing more and more. We'll actually rewrite, recode things, make it better, faster, better tested in PnP Core SDK, and then just plug it into PnP Framework. So you as user are not really impacted. You just automatically use PnP Core SDK under the covers then. Furthermore, Gotham did lots of fixes and improvements around Graph and other areas. So thanks for that, Gotham. And other folks as well did several fixes there. When it comes to the PnP Core SDK, so the right side of the screen, we are prepping for Beta 2. So plan is to have Beta 2 next week, aligned with the PnP Framework GA. And we're ready for Beta 2. We'll have some new things. For example, compliance tag and SharePoint permission support done by Erwin. Paolo did work on the permissions because we bridged PnP Framework and PnP PowerShell. So thanks for that, Paolo. Paul did work on documentation and teams and so on. So many people are contributing and things keep on growing and getting in better shape. So that's really good. And to wrap up, usage-wise, PnP keeps on growing as well. We actually in December hit almost 70,000 tenants using the PnP.NET library, so which is really great. I think that covers it, Paolo.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Bert. And let me say that I really love how the PnP Core SDK is becoming a fully functional SDK. And especially, I really love how the documentation is already rich compared with what we had before with the PnP Sites Core. Of course, there is a partially auto-generated documentation for PnP Core SDK, but we also have some documents that we wrote to extend some of the topics. I think you should really start having a look to PnP Core SDK and to the documentation to learn how to use it and how to play with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we learned from our mistakes from the past. So we focus on documentation and testing now. We didn't do that as much in the past. So
yeah, we are trying to improve on a daily basis, at least. Yeah, thank you, Bert, again. So what about PnP PowerShell? I see that my friend Erwin is online, so most likely he is the best man to tell us what is happening in the area of PnP PowerShell, right, Erwin?
Yeah, I'll try. So we're ready, just with the PnP framework, we're ready for 1.0 or 1.00 as the new versioning number system is. We're using semantic versioning there. Actually, I'm quite proud of the fact that the nightly builds that we've been releasing now every night already have been downloaded over 10,000 times. That's quite crazy. We have a new documentation site, just like the PnP Core SDK. We use the same structure, the pnp.github.io/PowerShell, where you'll find some articles already on how to do the authentication in the new PnP PowerShell and how to set up a credential manager and all those things. That's all located there now. Just to remind you, the new PnP PowerShell has the same name as the old PnP PowerShell. We realize that it is a bit confusing, but it has the same name. But it runs in PowerShell 5, so the blue PowerShell, PowerShell 7, the black PowerShell, and in the Azure Cloud Shell, which is actually the black PowerShell with the blue background and the Azure functions. So it runs basically everywhere, and then also on Linux, Mac, and Windows. What I didn't put on the slides here, but what we will actually bring out for version 1.0, which I'm pretty happy about, is the ability to do batching. So instead of, like, for instance, give you an example, add a list item, what we did in the old PowerShell, and also if you just run the command on itself, we create the item. And if you do that 1,000 times, then we still item, we create an item, we create an item, create an item, create an item. And that is pretty slow. Now, because under the hood, we're using the Core SDK also for some of the commandlets already. The Core SDK gives us the ability to do batching. And that basically means that instead of actually creating the item, we're creating the request to create the item, but the item itself is not being created at that moment yet. And so if you create 1,000 items, we create basically 1,000 requests. And then you say, execute this batch or invoke the batch. And then we create in one go, it's one request off to the server, those 1,000 items for you. The speed increase is incredible. The difference can be like, instead of minutes of running your script, it goes down to seconds. So it's really nice. There are some limitations of what you can do and what you can't do, and that has to do with the logic behind batching. But that will come in 1.0, and not every commandlet will support it. Only a subset of the commandlets will support it. The old version of PnP PowerShell, the legacy or classic PnP PowerShell, will go into read-only mode. I asked already, people already asked me, like, hey, what is happening with it? Will you take it away? No, we will not take it away. It will stay out there. It will just never be updated anymore. So it will be available in the PowerShell gallery. The repository will stay available, but you will not be able to post issues, and you will not be able to get a later version. We're not releasing new updates every month. So that is the state, and that's where we're going.
Thank you, Erwin. And let me say that I'm really happy and proud to see that PnP PowerShell is, I think, most likely the very first project consuming or using the PnP Core SDK. So it means that we are really close to release the Core SDK library. And of course, we are very, very close to release PnP PowerShell v1. So great news. Thank you, Erwin. So what else? YoTeams, plenty of frameworks, tools, and libraries to develop solutions and extend Microsoft 365. And it's now the time to talk about YoTeams. I see that Victor is online as well. So if you like, Victor, take the stage and tell us what is happening in the fields of YoTeams, please.
For sure. Happy New Year's, everyone. We got some great updates. Over the holidays now, I've been working on the new version 3 release, which is probably the biggest release since we started this project a couple of years ago. In general, it's sort of the same generator, but with the project with Scaffold looks very differently based on feedback from a lot of developers out there. We're trying to organize the structure of the project a little bit better, and due to the growth of the number of features that you can scaffold and you can build with for Microsoft Teams, that we needed to do this. So as you can see in this picture there, we now divide the source into better structure of the actual source files. And also the second big thing is what we're doing is that we have extracted all the gulp tasks that is used to build and the packages, the source and running and everything into a separate node package, so that can be updated independently to be able to react to changes in the manifest and other things going forward. So those are the two big things. I'm running the latest test now just to publish the first preview, which hopefully will be out in a few days. And after that, we can I'll let you all try it out and give feedback on it. So that's great. We just before Christmas we released 2.17, which is the last version of the version 2 branch, which contained the functional components. Also received good feedback on that. We did some minor updates to that use Teams hook to improve performance. Apart from that, we want to migrate from the wiki into the MK docs as well. So I'm looking forward to contributions on the documentation side. And of course, there's more samples going out there, and we probably need to update some of those samples working with the new version of YoTeams going forward as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you. What else? Microsoft Graph Toolkit, yet another really useful toolkit for developing enterprise-ready solution with Microsoft 365. I think there are our friends from the product group of Microsoft Graph Toolkit willing to share some news with us, right?
Yes, I'm here. This is Beth.
Thank you.
So yeah, for those of you who are new, the Graph Toolkit is a collection of reusable and framework agnostic components and authentication providers for accessing and working with Microsoft Graph. These components are fully functional right out of the box with built-in providers that authenticate with and fetch data from the Graph. And it makes it super easy to use the Graph in your application, and it super accelerate your development time. As of I think December, we had the latest update is our V2 version. And these are some of the new features that you can see on the left side, that we had 2 new components, which is the person card that mimics the first-party person card experience. And we have a new to-do component that splits out from our planner, or MGT original to-do component. And now we also have front-end caching of the Graph calls that makes it cheaper for your application to contact the APIs and servers, and a lot of supports on accessibility, such as localization right to left. We also have dark theme now, so that you can build your dark theme applications a lot more easily, and more packages instead of just one, so that you can include the correct package in your application as you need it. And there's a new React wrapper as well for people who want to build specifically React applications to connect to the Graph. And we're also expanding our horizon a little bit in terms of adding more cross-platform providers to enable people to also build on something like a Windows Form, and also focusing more on consumer scenarios, if you will. So the next coming up is a Electron provider, followed by Electron sample pretty soon. And help us make it better by finding us on aka.ms/mgt and try out the 2.0 and contribute to the project.
Thank you, Beth. So still talking about Microsoft Teams development, we have some new samples, really cool samples. One about creating Microsoft Teams with calling a Meet bot, and it is from Abdi Namini and Arun Kumar Anarparty. Hopefully I didn't mispronounce your name. Sorry about that if that will be the case. Then a sample about Teams bot with Azure AD and single sign-on in .NET Core, again from the same couple of folks. And then a sample about the Productivity Hub with Microsoft Graph Toolkit 2.0 by Sebastian Levert. You can find all of the samples about Microsoft Teams at aka.ms/Teams samples. And as I said before, we are also working on providing a new web-based tool to improve your quality of life whenever you will search for samples or extensibility points for Microsoft 365 in general, and of course for Microsoft Teams as well. If you have any cool samples that you want to share with the community, please feel free to reach out to us and to let us know so that we will make our best to let you share your sample with the whole community. So that said, it is now time for the Together mode picture. So if you like to be in the Together mode picture, please turn on your camera and you will show up in a matter of few seconds. I will start taking the picture. So let's see if we can have some more people. Come on, don't be shy. We are a community, we are friends. That's the only way we can be in the same place, by the way, nowadays. So please, okay. Okay, wonderful. I see quite a lot of people. So some more people are joining us now. Okay, few more seconds and then I will take the picture and that's it. Okay, one smiling and one making crazy gestures. Woo, wow, wonderful. Thank you, great. Okay, let's go back to the normal view and let's go back to the actual content. But we like to have this kind of recurring appointment in our bi-weekly meetings because I think this is a very good way of sharing everything from a community point of view. And not only content, but also pictures and time, you know. So it is now time to switch to the demos. I think it's time for David and Hugo to share with us the news about the content query web part with Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Are you ready, David and Hugo?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Paolo. So we're going to talk today about the content query web part in combination with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, or MGT as you may know it. My name is David Warner with Catapult Systems on the PnP team, and with me is Hugo Bernier.
Hi, everybody.
So let's talk a little bit about the content query web part. This is a familiar web part going back to the days of classic on-prem. You can see this screenshot here is circa 2013. It was a very powerful web part. It had some degrees of shortcomings, things like it couldn't do cross-site connections to get your content, but it was pretty powerful in pulling in data from lists and libraries and allowing you to customize how that content was presented on the page. Now, you had to use things like XSL, which wasn't everyone's favorite. In fact, in many cases, people really didn't even know what XSL was. I remember talking to a group of developers and saying, how do you like XSL? And they say, I use Microsoft Excel all the time. So not even everyone really knew about XSL or how to use it. It was a little cumbersome, not the best to use. But in this new world of modern and the patterns and practices community, where the community builds things for everyone, we have the React Modern Content Query web part. With this being a community web part, we're constantly seeing improvements. And so we're going to show off some of those improvements today, things like being able to dive into information about a person column, getting additional info about that person in terms of like email or picture, information about the person metadata. Very powerful. But then we're going to see how we can combine that with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Hugo, tell us a little bit about the Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
Well, Betty just stole my script, but as you already heard, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit are reusable framework agnostic components, and they make it easy to access and work with the Microsoft Graph. And the Microsoft Graph, in case you don't know, is this bunch of APIs that allow you to access pretty much all your information about your Office 365 and Microsoft 365 data. So the components are fully functional right out of the box, but when they're embedded in the SharePoint web part, they handle things like authenticating and fetching the data from the Microsoft Graph. Now, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, and I'll use MGT because it's faster to say that, makes it easy to use the Microsoft Graph in your web parts, but it usually requires you to edit your SharePoint framework code. Now, this session is not about coding. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to show you how we can combine a new feature of the Content Query web part with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And it will allow you to make calls to Microsoft Graph without writing any code. And this is a feature that's been requested a lot by users. They want to use the Content Query web part, but they want to be able to do things like showing information about people, when they obviously don't want to have to duplicate that information in their SharePoint lists. So David's going to show you today how to combine the Microsoft Graph Toolkit and the Content Query web part. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Hugo. All right, so then let's dive in and take a look at how we can make this magical combination of a Content Query web part and the MGT come to life. I'm going to jump over to a browser, and let's set the context here for the content we're going to work with. Now, this is a simple list. We know that Content Query web parts pull content from our lists or libraries. So we have three very simple columns: contributor name, picture, and contributor. Now, contributor and contributor name appear to be somewhat identical, but this is actually a person column, right? These are actually person columns that are associated to user accounts within this tenancy. Now, in the days of Classic, when you had this list, there wasn't a lot of things you could do to it to make it look better out of the box, just within a list. We have that, though, in today's list formatting ecosystem. So we can do some nice degree of formatting. Chris shows us amazing, powerful ways to use list formatting all the time. But there is a ceiling, right? We're not going to get involved with JavaScript on a list formatting definition. We're going to have a degree of ceiling on what we're able to do to our list formatting experience. If we want to up the ante on that experience or that solution, we're usually going to want to include some degree of JavaScript, maybe custom HTML that's not allowed within a list formatting definition, and maybe some additional CSS that also isn't allowable within a list formatting definition, using things like pseudo attributes for hover, etc., things like that. So how can we make that work? Well, the Content Query web part gives us access to all that, but the beauty is we don't have to be SPFX developers. We don't have to feel like we're going to scaffold out a new SPFX web part, we're going to create a bunch of TypeScript, we're going to package it, deploy it. No, the Content Query web part gives us access through what's called handlebars, which is really nothing more than just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So let's take a look at how we can make that work using the Content Query web part. And we're really covering this as a basis for those that are not yet maybe familiar with the Content Query web part. If you are, some of this may be a little bit of review, but we know we have new ones in the community all the time coming to these calls. So I'm going to edit this page. It's just a basic page, and I'm going to look for my Content Query web part. I've got it right there, and now it's been added to the page. So we're going to configure it. And if you've used the Content Query web part in Classic, then you're familiar with things like defining the source, sorting and filtering. So we can do cross-site collection sourcing for our lists. In this case, I'm going to connect to a list here in my site collection called Community Contributors, the one we just saw the list formatting was based on. So we're pointing at that. I'm going to close that section. If I wanted to sort or filter, I could. This is also very familiar from the classic days of SharePoint and the original Content Query web part. We're able to take advantage of that by accessing this information right here. It should be very familiar, and it's very easy to use if it's not familiar. It's a very standard way of sorting and filtering. We can define the field upon which we would like to sort on, and we can define a filter as well as additional filters if we would like to do that as well. Powerful. And then we come in and we select the fields that we would like to have access to. right? So you used to have to do this in code for XSL or in the web part code behind, which was kind of a pain. Now we're able to see all of our fields. So we're going to scan through, we're going to grab that contributor field, and we see that the web part is auto updating for us as we select those fields. So we're going to come down and we've got contributor, and that's really all we need is contributor, but I'm going to add in picture and I'm going to add in title just to show some comparison and contrasting. All right, so I've selected those. We see that information is showing up. For the picture, it's referencing some images on Twitter. For the title, it's really just a title. It's a plain text. And contributor looks to be identical to title. We see that there. They look to be identical, but they're really not, because remember, contributor is an actual person field. Now, I had mentioned that we have handlebars behind the scenes, and that's handled by the template, the handlebar template for our content. And you can access that directly here within the actual web part itself. We click that edit template content, brings up the template for us, and we can see here, like I mentioned, you don't have to be an SPFX developer at all. We're just talking about basic HTML. And we see here, if I zoom in, we can see it's referencing that information, contributor.text value, picture.text value, title.text value, right? It's very repetitive, referencing the content of the fields that we've said we want to have included. But as I mentioned, there's been a lot of requests for that person field to give us access to more than just the text value. Out of the box, as of right now, or previous to today, I should say, it would give us access to just this text value, but we might want additional information about the person, things like email or picture, or maybe display name like we see here, but in a more robust way. So if I hit save on this, we can see that it'll refresh. Everything's still the same. I'm going to go back in again, just to show you how we can edit this and make changes on the fly. I'm going to remove those three cells. And I'm just going to paste in some content. We're not showing the typing of everything because we don't want you to get overwhelmed with feeling like you have to be a perfect developer to do this. What we've done, though, is we've changed contributor.text value. That has gone bye-bye. And now we're referencing a new feature that's been added called person value, because it's a person field. And we can reference things like display name. All right, so I'm going to hit save, and we're going to see now it shows contributor and it shows display name. Not that much different, right? But I can also come back in and access additional information like the email address. Now, remember, we were seeing this before, but it was showing on individual columns. We would have had additional columns that show things like the picture or the email address. And so now that I've added contributor.personvalue.email, I can hit save, and bam, we see the email showing up. Now, this is a far cry. This design here with this big orange box and just simple lists, it's a far cry from the design that we had within the Polaroids. We still want to see it get a little closer to that design because we do want to have a nice, robust experience for our users. Well, we have the ability to reference external handlebar templates. Now, this is no different really from what you see here. We have CSS and HTML inside of this dynamically generated template that's being done by the Contact web part for us. That's great and fantastic. Maybe we don't really like working within this field, and certainly I think if anybody does any degree of development or changing and managing HTML or CSS, this is not the ideal way you'd want to do that. You may want to store it in an external location, which is what you can do right here. We can reference an external HTML file for our handlebar template. So we have one that's already been created using a basic look and feel. When I add that in, and again, we're not going to go into the details of this template. It's basic HTML. There's no smoke and mirrors here. It's nothing fancy. It's just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But now you can see it's changed that content, and it's using the exact same information that we've identified here, just in a greater degree of stylistic flair. And I have the ability now to do things like those hover pseudo attributes using CSS. We're using a filter to bring attention to the hovered contributor when we hover over them by going from black and white to color. So it's very powerful. But wait, there's more. What we've done here is we've said, okay, great, we're overwriting the default template to show a much better looking feel. You may have seen us showing this in other sessions. But what if we wanted to access a lot more information about the contributor, things that they're doing in the graph? Could you do that within this custom handlebar template? Yes, it's JavaScript, it's HTML, CSS, so you can write your own JavaScript to access it. But is there an easier way that doesn't require as much ongoing maintenance? Absolutely. The MGT is our friend. So now, if we go to mgt.dev, we're going to take a quick glimpse at some of the components that are available to you. Hugo, walk me through those.
Awesome. So there are a lot of Microsoft Graph Toolkit components, and they can all work with the content query web part. But the components that we'll use in our solution, because it just makes sense here, are the person and the person card. So you're seeing right now the person. The person component displays a person or contact by their photo, their name, and maybe their email address. Here you can see an example of that. And what we're looking at here, by the way, is something called the Microsoft Graph Toolkit Playground. So it allows you to actually test your Microsoft Graph Toolkit components before you even write it in your code. So here, this is something that automatically provides sample information. But obviously, if you sign in and you put it in your environment, it will be showing your actual information. Exactly. Thank you, David. Now, on the right side of that window, you can see this is the HTML code that you'd have to put in your web part or your solution if you wanted to display what you see on the left. And you can see here that it's got something called the person query attribute, which allows you to pass things like me to show information about me, or you can put an email address. So, and we'll come back to that shortly, but you could put an email address, or you can put a person's name to actually do a query, and it will actually find either, again, a person or a contact, and it'll do a query to the Microsoft Graph. And it'll render the information in a way that's, again, very consistent with the out-of-the-box SharePoint experience. Now, you can also change the layout between just showing an avatar image to an image and name, or an image, a name, and an email, which is what you see here. And you can do that by changing the view attribute. So if you don't specify, or for example, if you put one line, you'll see here that all we do is we show the person's image and the person's name, which is very consistent, again, with what you saw earlier on the SharePoint page. If you don't specify a view, the experience will be just the standard image without text. Now let's look at another component. If we look at the person card, the person card allows you to, what allows you to do is you can actually go to your MGT person component and add a attribute that says person card hover, and that's on the right side. And so what it allows you to do is when you mouse over, it'll actually show that rich person card that we're used to see in SharePoint and that we all love. And the great thing about this, and believe me, I've actually tried to rewrite this myself, and I have rewritten this myself. It's a lot of work to retrieve all the information that you need to see here. Thankfully, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit retrieves all this information for you and shows all that information. So now, and we could spend a bit more time if we wanted to explore the Microsoft Graph Toolkit person card, but for the purpose of this demo here, we're just going to stick to the person object. Now, the only thing that we're missing here is that we need, in order to display information about someone else, we need to have in the person query attribute, we need to have an email address. Now, it just so happens that what David just showed you is that in the content query web part, we can retrieve a contact or a person field, and we can retrieve their email address. So David, would you mind showing us how we can integrate that back into the content query web part?
Absolutely. Thank you, Hugo. So if we go back to our content query web part, I'm going to remove the custom URL to the template, and we're going to stick with the out-of-the-box template for now. We're going to show how even just using this included editor, we're able to access the MGT here within the web part itself. I'm going to remove, and our goal, of course, is to get a little closer to that Polaroid experience. So I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to paste in one of those MGT components. And instead of using me as Hugo had mentioned, we're going to reference the contributor.personvalue.email, right? So now we're able to repeat, because remember, this template is getting repeated for each user that is referenced in that list. So being able to provide their personvalue.email is what gives us access to being able to pass that via the person query right here and know that the Graph Toolkit will go get the appropriate information. So let me hit save. But wait, what's going on? We're not seeing that image show up like we should expect as we saw in the playground. Why is that? Well, lo and behold, there's a nice new feature that's just been added to the content query web part called Microsoft Graph Toolkit support. And you can enable this. Now you may say, why are you providing the ability to enable it? Why don't you just enable it out of the box and include it with content query web part without us having to worry about it? Well, it's because it's including extra JavaScript that gives you that connection to the MGT, and you may not need that in every case. You may only need the original power of the content query web part, so you might not need to have access to the toolkit. And so giving you the ability to enable it allows you to remove any of the extra JavaScript that you might not need. So I'm going to enable it, and we see now my template information that I had included for the MGT person query has fired, and it's pulling back all that information about the users within our environment. Very, very cool. All right, let's go beyond that. What if we did want to use that person card? Because right now we're only showing the MGT person. We didn't include that person card. I'm going to replace that. We see what I've added is that person card click, right? And I'm going to hit save. And now it doesn't really look a lot different, but when I hover over it and I click, now I can actually get that information from MGT loading in that person card. I didn't have to write more than a line of code. Literally a line of code gave me access to this information, a line of HTML. If I want to modify that a little bit more, and let's say we want to go from that 2 lines experience to 1 line, I can just change that there, hit save, and now we see 1 line. We see the picture has given us access to it. I can still click and see that information about April or Hugo or anyone else that is included here. Super cool, super powerful. Now, but wait, there's more. We're looking to try to get closer to the experience of our Polaroid solution. We want it to be rich and robust, a nice, appealing intro to our community contributors, but we still want to access that power of the graph. How can we combine those 2 things together? Well, the MGT provides templating, and we're not going to get too deep into templating here, but we're going to just quickly show you that templating experience here. I'm going to paste in some code, and we see that it's using a template. So I'm able to identify things like custom classes, right? And I'm going to hit save, and now we're getting a little closer. We have an image, we've wrapped a custom class around it. We maybe need to get rid of this little H3, so I'm going to go back in there and remove that, so that it's getting a little bit closer to what we have. Okay, we're getting closer, and now I'm still able to access that information. I can click and see April. Now, what if I were to combine my custom template with that MGT reference that we see right here, right? What if I were to integrate that? Well, that's exactly what we've done right over here. This particular page is using a content query web part, and again, we're running a little short on time, but I want to show you the final experience. We see that I've got that ability to still show those Polaroid, and I can hover, and I can click, and I can see information about Hugo via the MGT. We can see that he does lots of SharePointy stuff. We know he's awesome for that, and we can see all that information. So very, very powerful. These are new features that are added to the content query web part. Let me go back to the slides and just wrap up. Here are some resources for you. Thank you all for your time today. Paolo, back to you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Hugo. Super cool demo. As a developer, I'm speechless. Thank you so much. Great stuff. So now we have a demo from Matt about the SharePoint Success Site. I see that you are there, Matt, so take it away.
Thanks, Paolo. Hi, everyone. So first, brief introduction. I'm a program manager within the SharePoint customer engineering organization at Microsoft, and I help our customers be successful with our technology. Today, I'm really excited to be here to be talking to you about the newly launched SharePoint Success Site. This is a new tool for you in your tool belt to be able to help users better adopt SharePoint and to create amazing SharePoint sites. So what I'm going to cover today is just a brief overview of what the SharePoint Success Site is. So bear with me for a couple slides, then I'll quickly move into a demo to show you the site, and then we can talk, or I'll point you to how to get it and how to get going in terms of implementing the SharePoint Success Site. All right, so first let me talk a little bit about who this is built for and how it will help them. There's two personas, the first being an admin or the service owner of SharePoint, or more broadly speaking, collaboration in an organization, as well as, of course, users, or more specifically in some cases, site owners. So let's talk about the SharePoint service owner and what this Success Site will help them with. We've spoken to a lot of customers, a lot of service owners, and heard some pretty consistent themes in terms of where they wanted some help to help drive adoption of SharePoint in their organization. So that's what we're focused on here, helping the SharePoint service owner realize more value from the investments that they've made in SharePoint, to help them enable employees and users to create sites that are purposeful, that are used by others, that are high quality, as well as being compliant with whatever site usage policies might be in place within the organization. So that's really the service owner. And then in terms of users and or site owners specifically, it's to address those two questions you can see at the bottom of the slide. Why should I even bother using SharePoint? What's it good for? How can it help me accomplish my goals? And then how do I create amazing SharePoint sites to achieve my goals? So that's where the SharePoint Success Site comes into play. It's a ready to implement, up-to-date, customizable SharePoint online site that helps organizations drive adoption and realize value from SharePoint Online. This is a solution that does require Microsoft 365 learning pathways as a prerequisite. So you have to have that installed first to be able to use the SharePoint Success Site. For those of you that don't know what learning pathways is, it's a site that we implemented or made available probably more than a year ago now. And it's essentially a solution that helps organizations train their end users on Office 365, all the apps and services. And so we've got training in that not only covers SharePoint at a very high level, I would say level 100, but all the apps and services, Teams, OneDrive, Yammer, the Office apps, so on and so forth. So why did we build a Success Site when we already have learning pathways? Well, we did hear from customers that they wanted something that goes deeper than what Learning Pathways provides. Learning Pathways for SharePoint specifically, it's very intended to be high level, and then to target site owners more specifically, that's where we created this SharePoint Success Site. So we go deeper in terms of creating SharePoint sites and solutions. I would say probably about level 200, level 300 as well. We also talk about the why and the what, how to create great sites, like putting the technology aside in how to configure a site, a page, but what makes a great SharePoint site. So that's really the focus of the SharePoint Success Site. And a couple things just to point out, what I think makes the SharePoint Success Site something that you should consider as part of your set of tools to use is it offers training on what makes a great site and how to build it in SharePoint Online. It's using the content that we have available on support.office.com and docs.microsoft, but we're bringing it into your tenant so that you can customize that training content to suit your environment, how you've implemented SharePoint, and at the same time benefit from the Microsoft curated and maintained content side by side with whatever custom content you may need for your implementation. A second on how it all works. If you've seen Learning Pathways, it's very similar. So the content on the left-hand side, that's available within support and docs. We bring that into a GitHub content repository. It's always, we keep that up to date as new features are released. And we bring that into your SharePoint Success Site, which you've installed, hopefully, within your tenant via the Learning Pathways custom web part. And so the Success Site is just a new content set that's available within the Learning Pathways web part, which is how we bring it into your site and how at least the Microsoft curated content remains up to date. And don't forget, very important, I'm stressing it a couple times here, you obviously need an app catalog in your tenant, and you need version 4 or higher of Learning Pathways. Okay, so let's take a look at the site. I'm going to do a quick demo. So I'm an end user. I've just been assigned responsibility of creating a SharePoint site for my department. And I work in marketing, and so I've been directed to the SharePoint Success Site here to get started, to learn what's possible, to learn how to create a SharePoint Success Site and do it within the guidelines that my organization has set. So we're here on the home page. Lots of things I can do from here, and I'm going to go into some of these sections in more detail, but I can get inspired, learn what is possible, plan my site, launch, build my site, launch and manage my site, ask questions. You can see this comes pre-configured with the people web part. So if there's an intranet team at your organization, having them listed as contacts is obviously going to be helpful. And then we do suggest bringing in a Yammer conversation web part, where that community in Yammer is set up for your site owners or end users for SharePoint. So this is where they can come and ask questions, share successes, share insights, that sort of thing. But let's get inspired. So a lot of the times for people who are new to SharePoint, they're not sure what they could use it for. So that's what this section is all about, to give them that inspiration. And you can see we've got the web part here, so I can easily navigate going from one asset in the playlist to another. I can also use the drop down here to jump ahead. But on this main page here, I've got examples of different ways that I can use SharePoint. So if I'm in marketing, I can do a product launch. I can set up a new employee onboarding site, so on and so forth. And over time, we do hope to add to this. But as I click into these, let's say, as I'm a marketing manager, I want to learn how to use SharePoint or better understand how I could use SharePoint to set up an internal product launch site. I'm launching a new product, a new widget, and I want to get everyone in the company excited about that and able to be evangelists for me, both inside the organization and outside. So making sure that they know about the new product. So this is going to walk me through how I can create that site. And what might be some common goals for a site like this, but it gets into detail on what it looks like to plan, to build the site, to manage it. So we have content like this across 4 different scenarios. In addition to that, we've got this success stories section, which we encourage you to set up as a way of profiling what people in your organization are doing with SharePoint as another source of inspiration to highlight those success stories. You can see here we've got a sample example of how HR has built a new employee onboarding site using SharePoint, kind of as an internal case study. Okay, so I'm excited. I'm now ready to get started in building my site. I'm going to start with what I have to do from a planning perspective. So these are all the different playlists. I can dive into those to learn about different SharePoint site types. And go from there. So now that I've got my site planned, there are other playlists just to call out here, I think, that are a little bit more about planning. I can learn about the different components that go into a site. I can build my site or learn how to build my site, so creating and customizing the site. One thing to keep in mind as I go through this pre-configured training content is it's fully customizable using the Learning Pathways web part, which I'll show you in just a moment. Makes it super simple to copy existing playlists over and then just delete the assets that don't apply and add your own assets, which are really SharePoint pages at the end of the day that get organized into this playlist so that you can map the training content to your environment. We know, obviously, some customers have implemented SharePoint in the way that sites can be requested or created in maybe a specific way for their organization. So that might be an area of customization you want to consider. But you can see this content is rich in graphics, as well as there's lots of video used throughout the site. So this walks me through how to create a site or how to build it. Then I can go through launching and managing the site. And then finally, if I want to do something special for my site beyond the basic, I can get into some of the more advanced site creation capabilities, like making the site personal using audience targeting, lots of ways to enhance my site. The last thing I'll show you from an end user perspective here is we know it's important for site owners that you may have a set of usage guidelines, compliance or governance policies that you want your users to follow when creating a site. So we do provide a sample of what some of those guidelines could be. This is purely for example purposes. We would expect each organization is going to have their own set of usage guidelines. So we've got a link here to a document, public document here, that can help you in writing your site usage guidelines. And that includes some guidance, some sample texts, some resources to help you figure out what's best in terms of your specific guidelines. So that's an end user view. I'm up against the clock here. I'm going to have to speed things up. I apologize. But let me just jump into a couple things very quickly. Let me show you how to customize this. So I come to the administration. I just select the gear here. This is going to take me into the learning pathways admin section. So you can see here we've got the admin for learning pathways, and then just to the right of it, the SharePoint Success Site. This is the new content set that once you install the Success Site will be available. And from here, I can hide, I can create net new playlists or copy and then edit existing playlists to suit my needs. Won't be able to go into that, unfortunately, but the last thing I wanted to show you here that provides all the information that you need to learn how to install, how to customize. Let me first show you where you can find it. It's up on the lookbook. Go into solutions. It's the last one here in the list, the SharePoint Success Site. From here, we've got a video on how to provision the site. This is starring Julie Turner, who was gracious enough to create that. But then I can go into our docs to read about what the site is all about, how to install it, and then how to customize the site as well. Okay, so hopefully piqued your interest to learn more. Come check out these docs pages, go to lookbook, maybe install it, play around with it, and customize it to suit your needs. And hopefully it's something that you can see adding value and a place to send your end users or new site owners as a beginning point for their site creation journey, to arm them with what they need to create a high quality and successful site. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you everybody for joining us for this call. I hope you enjoyed it. There were really great demos. So see you in a couple of weeks, the 21st of January, for the next General Dev community call, and next week for the monthly call, as well as for the client side call. A few more content, if needed, is available at these URLs if you like. And let me say that I'm really happy to see that the lookbook side is providing many more content and samples available for free to the whole community, because it's the way we can improve and increase the quality of all of the solution provided on top of Microsoft 365. So thank you again. Thanks for joining, and see you next time. Thank you.